Levi supposed to introduce these things?
He hasn't passed. I don't know if he was always a person of record.
This already started. I wonder if he's out there. How much time do you need?
Maybe 30 minutes.
Okay.
Yeah.
So we'll wait a couple more minutes to get a few more people in. Mark, Steve, or Guy, know what's next week?
It's on the wall. It's on the wall.
No, they can you produce that?
They should. They should. They normally leave it at you.
That's why I'm running around.
That's all the courses. Save all.
That might be too much.
Okay. What? Yeah,
I put it up, Mike said it.
Is it part of Levi Lewis. Nice to meet you. Thank you for coming. Okay, you get started?
Ready to get started? You can even ask if we want to turn the light off.
Yeah. Did you want to cut off?
Both of them.
I think I know what switch to use.
Okay. All right, welcome everybody to our next edition of the Curriculum Series. Our speaker today is Dr. Kadone. She is one of our professors over in the engineering department and technical communication. She's going to be teaching us today about resumes and cover letters. So without further ado, Dr. Kadone.
Okay, let me just tell you a little bit about my background, and then I want to put a couple things on the board, and then I'm going to take you through just a few slides, and then I have some handouts to give you about resumes and cover letters, and then we'll look at some example ones on the screen and kind of dissect them a little bit. I'll take up about 30 or 35 minutes of your time to do that. I've been at Mercer for 9 years, and I teach in the Technical Communication Department, and every semester I teach a course called TCO 341, or Technical Communication, and as part of that course, one of the assignments is to do a resume and a cover letter, and the students have to go out and find a job on Monster.com or CareerTrack or some other job listing site, or maybe a job they found somewhere else, and they have to write a resume and cover letter tailored to that specific job and turn that in, and we do peer review processes and we grade those, and I give them a lot of feedback and teach them about how to build an effective resume and cover letter. Before I came to Mercer, I worked for a company called Raytheon, which is a defense contractor. You might have heard of them. They're on par with Lockheed Martin and some of the other large defense contractors. They made the Patriot missile, they make airplanes, they make a lot of things like that. But I worked for a division in Pensacola, Florida, that developed web-based training for the Navy and the Air Force and some commercial customers. And it was part of my job to vet all the resumes that came in. We hired all the time. We were constantly hiring people because we were constantly getting new contracts with the government. And in order to fulfill the responsibilities of those contracts, we would have to hire engineers and programmers and graphic designers and all sorts of people. And so I would take the resumes as they came in. And I worked there for 5 years. And over that 5-year period, I literally looked at hundreds of resumes. And we had a system that worked pretty well. We had 2 files, a yes and a no. And the resumes would come in, and I would look at them. And if they were halfway appropriate for the job we were looking at, they would go in the yes file, and then they would be directed to the people who would actually look at bringing those people into the organization for that specialty. Most of the resumes that came in, probably 90% of them, automatically went into the no file, mainly because they were not legible, they were put together in a bad format, they were obviously a resume that had been written for a different job. You could tell by the way the resume was written, and so we would just discount them immediately. Many times on the yes resume, we would get further contact from those people, but most of the time on the no resumes, we would never hear from those people. They would just send the resume in hopes that we would call them, and then they would never get back in touch with us. So the no file was huge, and we would purge it every year or so and get rid of those resumes. And then every so often we would see those same resumes come back again in the same format. Some of them were so hard to read that you would be amazed at the quality of the resumes that we got. People were, just hoping, just kind of a Hail Mary, that we would give them a call. So there's 3 things I want you to take away from today that if you don't learn anything else, I want you to remember these 3 things. Your resume is not the only thing that goes into the job application packet. There's really 3 things that go in the job application packet. These are 3 of the things I want you to remember. One is the resume, one is the cover letter, and then whether you get interviewed or not, you need another form of communication with the person or the organization to whom you're applying for a position. And that would be, in the case of an interview, a thank you response, which is appropriate to do that by email now. If you have the email address of the person that you interview with, it's always appropriate to follow up with a thank you for the interview. Is there any more information I can provide you, or do you need my references or something like that? In the case that you don't hear from the company or organization and you've been waiting for a couple of weeks and you know they've received your resume, but you don't know what the status of it is, it's appropriate to send a query to them in the form of an email or a phone call or something like that. And just say, I'd like to make sure you received my resume and see if you need any more information about me in regard to this position. I'm really interested in it. So the complete packet for a job application really includes those things, okay? Now the resume and the cover letter both, these are the 3 things that I want you to take away from today. The resume should basically tell your story, okay? The resume and the cover letter both, in a different way, should tell your personal story to the organization that you're applying to. If it doesn't tell your story, then you haven't succeeded because they won't know who you are. The resume is your paper or electronic representation of who you are until they meet you in person, okay? The other thing is that the resume and the cover letter both should change often and be tailored to the position that you're applying. You shouldn't use the same resume for every job that you're applying for. You should tailor it slightly so that the organization knows that you cared enough to write a resume specifically to the job that you're applying to. And if you use the job description and use the words in the job description, you can easily tailor your resume to the job and let the company know that you're concerned about the duties and requirements of that job. Thank you. The last thing for this, the resume and cover letter, they should tell your story. You should change them and tailor them often, and you should always follow up. And that comes right here in the thank you or the query. You should always follow up in the thank you or the query. Now what I want to do is just tell you about the parts of the resume and cover letter. I want to give you a formula for writing both. Okay? resume. And if you can remember the formula, then you can pretty much put together an effective resume and cover letter for whatever job you're applying for. And it can be very different jobs. You can use the same basic information to tailor it, and you can put together a pretty effective package. First of all, a resume is, the key word here is a selective record of your background. It's a selective record of your educational experience, your work experience, your certifications, computer languages you know, your abilities, all those things. I say that you send it sometimes accompanied by an application letter because sometimes you just upload your resume into the electronic universe and you don't really know where it goes. And you can't really send a cover letter in some instances, but most of the time you can send a resume with a cover letter to potential employees. And the key word there is selective. I look at a lot of student resumes, and a lot of students, even in their junior year, will put that they were president of their junior class in high school on their resume. Or they will put, I've actually seen students who put things they did in middle school on their resume. I've seen students list jobs that maybe were volunteer that had absolutely nothing to do with the job they were applying for and really gave them little credibility, didn't really add anything to them, and they probably should have left them off. So a resume is really important to understand that it's a selective record. It's not that you're picking out pieces of your persona and only telling an organization a little bit about yourself or enough to convince them, but you're choosing the things that are most appropriate to go on your resume. Yes?
When you were reviewing resumes and cover letters, about how much time did you give to each?
When I worked at Raytheon, I could review a resume and a cover letter each in about 10 minutes. Yeah. Because we scanned them just to look for keywords and format and things like that. And if something jumped out at us, it would go in the maybe, yes, you know. And then most of the time you could tell immediately if it was a no. So when I went to college, I worked as a lifeguard every summer. And that was my summer work. Every summer I worked as a lifeguard. And when I started applying for jobs outside of college, when I finished college, I really didn't have any work experience. So I included my summer employment on there. But once I got a full-time job and then left that job and applied for another job and started getting more full-time work experience, I started dropping off the lifeguard experience because the employers really didn't care that I had been a lifeguard. It didn't add to my credentials or qualifications in any way. So I began to be more selective once I got more experience. Right now, you may want to put as much as you can on your resume because you're trying to convince employers of your credentials and your qualifications. And you may not have had time to get that many internships or get that much experience so far. But later on, you're going to want to start adjusting your resume to include and not include information that's important to you and to your organization that you're applying for. So the purpose of your resume really is to, number one, express your qualifications for the position. Number two, describe your history, and then tell your personal story. And the audience for your resume is always changing. And that's probably the most important thing I can tell you today. If you just do a resume one time and then use it over and over, it's going to be less effective. Organizations know when you used a resume that you've used before because they can just tell by the wording. So it's very important to figure out who the audience is. If you're applying for a job, you need to do a lot of research about the company or organization that you're applying to. You need to look at the other jobs in the company and how the job you're applying for fits into the other jobs. You need to look at the duties. You need to try to figure out the salary level if they've given you information on it so you kind of know what you're shooting for. You need to know the context of that job, if you can figure out what department it's in or how it fits into the organizational structure. What are the buzzwords the company uses for their mission, for their goals? You need to do all that research because the audience for your resume changes from organization to organization, and you need to be aware of that and stay on top of that. Let me tell you about the parts of the resume, and this is where we get into the formulaic aspect of it that'll help you remember how to put it together. The top third of the resume is always the heading, and the important information to include in the heading is your contact information, how they can get in touch with